guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in July, and I have a stack of them next to me. I read 14 books in the month of July. That's a lot. Like that's a lot of books read in the month of July, and I have to say, for the most part, I enjoyed everything I read. There are a few things that I just felt mediocre about, but like I said, for the most part, I enjoyed it. And I feel like that's been the trend the past few months, so I'm really happy with my reading lately. I don't know if it's I'm finally realizing what books that I actually enjoy and I'm just picking those up instead of picking up books that are popular or people recommend that are not really for me. But whatever the case may be, I've been enjoying my reading. So let's get right into the video. Okay, these are in no specific order. I literally just piled them into my arms from my bookshelf in the living room and brought them into my daughter's room to film. So I haven't ranked them. They're not even in the order that I read them in this month. It's just random, but that's fine. The first book I'm going to talk about was actually probably my favorite of the entire month, and this is Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury. And I think it's so comical that I liked this so much because we read Something Wicked This Way Comes in, I think, October or November of last year for our in-person book club, and I was one of the only ones that did not like it. The writing was so over-the-top flowery. It pulled me out of the story. It was just, I did not like it. I gave it a 2-star, and then after I talked to everybody, I'm like, you know what? I keep thinking about this book. Maybe I'll bump it up to 3 stars. So I think on Goodreads it's 3 stars. But this I gave 5 stars, okay? Like, I don't know. Maybe it was because I knew how his writing was, and so I was expecting the flowery writing, and so it didn't shock me like it did in Something Wicked This Way Comes. But, or maybe I just like the story better. This just, it was so good. It felt kind of like my childhood as in the summer, because there are chapters about this boy who is sitting on the front porch with his grandma, and they're like shelling beans and stuff. I'm like, that was me. I did that with my grandma. Or there's another chapter about how he's having to walk home in the dark and how he's terrified because of some things that are happening. And I'm like, that's me. I was terrified of the dark as a kid. And I mean, maybe I still am a little bit outside, like, you know, it's dark and you're outside. But but I don't know, for whatever reason, I loved this. It did not have as much as like a linear storyline as Something Wicked. It was more little snippets and snapshots of this boy's summer. But I mean, I would reread this. I'm going to reread this probably next summer. And the fact that I liked it so much, I think I'm going to try Something Wicked in the fall again, because maybe I'll like it better. Maybe I'll bump up the star rating for me and I'll enjoy it now that I know how Bradbury writes. But this was definitely a win for me. Okay, so the next book on the stack was A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. And I liked this too. It was just like, it's a comedy and it's a classic, and it was just silly. This girl, Lucy, travels abroad, and she faints into the arms of this man who is completely not in her same class. And so it's just, she's got someone waiting for her at home who's more appropriate for her. And it's just, I don't know, a view of like society back in the day. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was funny. I thought it was engaging. The writing style was accessible for a classic, and I liked this one as well. I was telling Savannah Grace about it, and she actually wants to read it soon also. Okay, so the next book I'm going to talk about is The Hero of Ages, which I can't say much obviously about the plot because this is the third in a trilogy. It's in the Mistborn trilogy, and you know, it's the conclusion, so I don't want to spoil this for anybody. But this is a reread for me, and upon reread, I still gave this 5 stars. I gave all 3 books 5 stars. It's a 5-star series for me. And this one kind of did the same thing that book 2 did. In the beginning and in the middle, I felt like, okay, I may bump this down to a 4. And then the ending, I know some people don't like the ending for valid reasons, but I don't know. I really liked it. I thought it just, from the beginning to the end, it made sense to me. You know, like the ending made sense and it worked. And it was a lot of fun to reread this. I'm excited to hop into Era 2 next month, but I think this was a great wrap up to the series. Okay, so next up I've got some manga. This is the volume 1 in Kuma Bear, and it was okay for me. I had heard pretty good things about this. I know Tiffany really enjoys this series, and so I checked it out from the library, and for me it just kind of was mediocre. It's about this girl who gets sucked into a video game, and she doesn't really like her real life. She doesn't have a great relationship with her parents. All she wants to do is play video games, so she's dropped out of school. She makes money on the stock market. That way she can play video games all of the time. And for me, like when she got sucked into the video game, she was just like, oh, cool. This is better than real life. I'll just pretend that I'm in a video game. Like, because things were happening and she had to actually do stuff. She didn't just sit there, you know, and fiddle her thumb playing a video game. And she had to fight all of these people. And she literally was an expert. Like, there was no learning curve. There was no nothing. She was just great. She was right off the bat great. And that kind of annoyed me. So I actually got all of the volumes that my library had available. And it was like 1, 2, and 3. And I didn't even continue with 2 or 3. I may later in the future. But for right now, I'm just going to put this one down because there are some other manga series that interest me more than this one. So this one is definitely going to go on the back burner for me for now. Okay, so this is another manga I picked up at the end of the month, and this one is Haikyuu, and this is all about a boys volleyball team. And these two players are rivals in middle school, and they get to high school and they realize that they're on the same team. Now they're not competing against each other, they're on the same team, so they're competing together. And it's about them learning to play well with each other and just the dynamics of the new team. And I picked this up, but it was on, I had to wait for a while to get it from the library. And so in the meantime, Savannah Grace and I started the anime of this. And because I did that, this was kind of repetitive. Like I had already watched all of this happen. And so for that reason alone, I feel like I'll probably just continue this series in the anime and not the manga, because she and I are watching it together and it's just kind of fun, and we're already several episodes in. And so again, this was fun to read, but it felt like I was just rewatching the show. So I probably won't continue with this manga either. All right, the next book I'm going to talk about is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. And this is book 2 in this series. And I really enjoyed it. I love how cozy this series is. I love how Emily just goes for it when she's searching out these fairy homes, and she gets herself into lots of pickles, but it's a lot of fun. And so in this one, in the first one, she was like making an encyclopedia of all of the different types of fairies, and in this one she's creating a book of maps for all of their different worlds where all of the fairies live. So it was a lot of fun. I like this series a lot, and I will definitely continue when the 3rd book comes out. All right, so this was the read for our in-person book club, Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This was a reread for me. This was actually the first Sanderson I ever read, and I read this 5 years ago, and I gave it 5 stars, and I loved this reread. It was a lot of fun. I love Spensa. She's just so over the top dramatic, and she doesn't even realize it until her spaceship kind of gets a little snarky with her, and she's like, oh, do I really sound like that? Yeah, I do. Embot's hilarious. I love him so much. And I don't know, I mean, Brandon Sanderson, I think, hit it out of the park with this one, because he's writing about a teenage girl, and he's definitely not a teenage girl, but he nailed it, I feel like. And I love Spence's growth in the whole series, and I'm excited to reread the entire series. That way I can read the final book, Cytonic, because I started it and I'm like, what is happening? So I didn't want to do it a disservice and rate it low and not enjoy it as much as I would if I didn't have the refresher. So I'm definitely going to start reading the entire series again. That way I can just finish it up. Okay, so my nonfiction pick for the month of July was All Creatures Great and Small by James Herriot. And this was so comfy and cozy. Yeah, it's like bloody and gross at some points because it's talking about his time as a vet. But the way that he writes is so engaging, and he writes about the countryside and these people that live there and these animals that he cares for in such a tender way. And I really, really enjoyed it. I know this is the first in a series, so I will probably continue along with the series because this is just outlining his first, I think, couple years as a vet. And I'm excited to see all of the stories that he has to tell as he progresses in his career. The next book I'm going to talk about is Jack London's 5 Great Short Stories. And this I picked up because it was the Read Your Bookshelf challenge prompt, a short story collection. And I had this on my shelf. And this was just okay. Like, I feel like some of these stories were just not great. Some of them kind of flowed together a little bit, but then the last one was so like out of left field and it didn't fit in with the others because the others are all about like nature and fighting against nature and, you know, just kind of that thing. And then the last one was about a fighter, like literally a boxer in Mexico. So it kind of just didn't fit. Not my favorite short story collection, but I feel like I remember listening to The Call of the Wild with my kids when they were really little, and I feel like I didn't like it. So maybe Jack London is just not the author for me. Okay, the other classic I picked up in the month of July was A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. And it's a nonfiction, and it's taken from some of her talks to people. And it's all about like women need a room of their own. They need a space to be able to create. And they're not really, in her time, afforded that luxury, you know, because they have to be wives and mothers. And even like the higher learning is not really open to women in the way that it is to men back then. And it was interesting and I enjoyed reading it. I don't know if I feel like some of it was just kind of, her train of thought, I feel like was kind of jumping from one place to the other. And I'm not sure. I mean, I would try one of Virginia Woolf's fiction works because I feel like this maybe didn't give an accurate view of her writing style. But yeah, I mean, it was okay. I don't know if I would ever recommend it to somebody or pick it up again, but I'm glad I read it. The next book I picked up purely because it was the K-Tropathon read for like the group read. And oh my gosh, I'm so glad I did. I think this was like my second favorite book of the month. It's Welcome to the, I'm going to butcher this. Oh, I am so bad at pronunciations. The Hyunam Dong Bookshop. And this, I took my daughter to an all-day volleyball camp, and I literally sat in the car for 8 hours and I read this the entire time. And I finished it in one sitting. It was so good. I just loved it so much. It's a Korean novel, and it's about this girl who did everything she was supposed to do. You know, she went to school, she got married, and it didn't end well for her, and she's burnt out. And so she starts this bookshop, and in the process of starting this neighborhood bookshop, she comes to find her family. Like, it's all about found family. And I was reading a little bit about this, and I'm pretty sure I have this correctly, but I think they called it like, it's like a healing cozy read or something, and it just kind of feels like that. It feels like this was good for the soul, you know what I mean? It was just cozy and great. And then I love the fact that this little lady right here, she is at the end of every chapter, just walking her dog through the neighborhood. But it was just so good. And there were so many references to books that the bookmark I brought with me, I wrote down all of them on the bookmark. And there were so many that I want to just look up and potentially read as well because of this. But this was super good. Really enjoyed it. Okay, now time for this big chunker, The Count of Monte Cristo. I am so glad I read this. I really, really enjoyed it. Like I've said multiple times, for the first, I don't know, 300 or 400 pages, I thought I was reading Zorro. And so I was really confused. And because of that, I actually had a note on my phone in the notes section listing all of the characters in this book and who they were. Because there were so many characters in this book that I was getting them mixed up. And I feel like it's probably because for... you know, this much of the book, I thought I was reading a different book, but once I got them all sorted out in my brain, it was so much more enjoyable for me. This is basically, it's a classic, but it's like very plot driven. And it was fun to read a plot driven classic, and it's about this guy. He is thrown into prison, wrongfully accused. And when he gets out of prison, he makes it his life's work to exact revenge on the people in his life who he feels are responsible for his time in prison. And it was great. It was wonderful. The ending was perfect. It all came together, like, you know, like you're thinking, who is this person? At 800 pages, but by 1,000 pages, when it's all wrapping up, you're like, oh, this is so good. So I'm really glad that I read this. This was actually a carryover from June. I started it in June, but it was so hefty that I finished it in July. Okay, I've got 2 more books. I don't have the physical copies, so I'll just put a picture up. But the first one is Before the Coffee Gets Cold. This was lent to me by a friend, and I really enjoyed this one. It's like kind of a time travel book, and there are 5 different scenarios where these people go into this coffee shop and they get to have a cup of coffee with somebody from their past, but the catch is they have to drink their coffee before the coffee gets cold, or they'll be stuck in the past and they'll become a ghost. But I really enjoyed these little stories. There were, you know, stories of sisters or husband and wife or mother and daughter, and they were all really beautiful and touching in their own way. But the one that impacted me the most, I feel like, was the husband and wife story. Their conversation and the whole thing that happened with them. That one made me cry. The others, I didn't cry, but that one did make me cry. I really enjoyed that one. And I know it's a series, but I've heard that the rest of the series is not as good as the first. And so I don't know. I don't feel the need to continue on with the series. One hang up I did have was every story, it was connected, but it kind of felt like it was its own short story. But they explained the process of going back in time in every story. And so you're reading about how you have to drink the coffee before it gets cold, or else this will happen, and all of these things. You read it in every short story or every chapter, and that did kind of get repetitive. But other than that, I really enjoyed it. Okay, so the last book I'm going to talk about is In the Labyrinth of Dragons, and this is book 4 in the Lady Trent series, and our buddy read this with Tiffany from Beautiful Minutia, and I really enjoyed this one. This was everything that I wanted in this series, because book 1, phenomenal, loved it. Books 2 and 3 were kind of a letdown for me. I did enjoy book 3. That was the basilisk one, right? Yes, that was the one where they were on the ship. I enjoyed that one more than book 2, but book 4 was great. She is in another country again. She's on another adventure. She's finding out more about her beloved dragons. and there's like a whole labyrinth element, and some of the characters that you're introduced to in book 3 are back, and I just love them so much. And it had dragons throughout, which was a plus because book 2 was very low on the dragon information, and so I'm excited. I've heard book 5 is just as good as book 4, so I'm excited to read that one and finish up the series, but I really enjoyed this book as well. Okay, so there you have it. Those are the books that I read in July. Like I said, I read a lot. I read 14 books, and for the most part, I enjoyed all of them, which is great. I'd like to hear in the comments, have you read any of these? What do you think about them? Chat with me a little bit. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.